Hello, Booktube. It's Eric, and I am back with yet more books. Lots more books. I went to library fill a bag sale last Saturday, and then I hit my local thrift stores and wound up with a whole bunch of good stuff. It's gonna be a lot of horror, a bunch of action stuff, just some random stuff. So, without further ado, continuing my Clive Cussler, Isaac Bell collection. Picked up these hardcovers and these paperbacks of our local Salvation Army, real cheap. So reader's copies is what those are. I have tried to organize this, but there's just too much stuff. Horror paperback from Tor. I've seen Lisa Tuttle's name around and figured I'd check this out. Ursula K. Le Guin. This is some science fiction classic. Lathe of Heaven, and I actually dig this covers from this era. Stephen King, Cycle of the Werewolf, classic stuff. All right, trigger warning. I don't usually want to do that, but I don't want people to be surprised. That's just me being respectful of hopefully what the viewers need for their sensibilities. But Columbine by Dave Cullen. So my background educationally is I have a degree in criminal justice with an emphasis on security management. For our last big security class, we had to do a project that involved doing a security plan for a high school in East Lansing, Michigan. After that, I worked at University of Michigan Department of Public Safety Housing Security Division back in the 90s. And then I went to school for a year and a half for secondary education to become a history teacher. So my background is in security and it's in education. So Columbine was something that was kind of fascinating to me from an academic point of view. And this book is a great book. I've read it. It really explores what really went on. It talks about the lead up to the Columbine incident. Dave Cullen's a journalist who covered the incident. The biggest thing I got from this book that I learned was Columbine was not a school shooting. It was a failed bombing that became a school shooting. Once that sunk in, it kind of opened my eyes to there's a lot more going on than just what we've seen in headlines. But anyways, it's a great book. If you are interested in the subject, highly recommended. All right, moving on to something a little more fun, a lot more fun. Larry Block's Burglar, Who Traded Ted Williams. The Burglar books are kind of his gentleman burglar stories. They're fun, light, comedic. If that's something you dig, if you like the Dortmunder series by Donald Westlake, I highly recommend the Burglar books. In fact, Westlake and Block were friends, and they talked about doing a Dortmunder Burglar, Bernie Robards is the character's name, crossover. But because one of the books were written in third person and one of them was written in first person, they couldn't figure out how to make that work. At any rate, good stuff. All right, classic science fiction from the 80s, John Varley's Steel Beach. I read this way back in the day. Saw this nice looking hardcover and just couldn't leave that at our local Salvation Army. All right, an author that I've actually met, Ben Hamper, the Rivet Head, Tales from the Assembly Line. Ben Hamper from Flint, Michigan. He is in Michael Moore's Roger and Me. He was a friend of Michael Moore's at the time. He wrote record reviews for Moore's local paper there in Flint. But this is about his time as a worker on the assembly line, and he's a big punk rock music fan. So got to meet him in college. Really cool guy. We hung out. A bunch of us took him out for drinks afterwards. Yeah, really dig this book, and I think it's well worth checking out. And I know this is from the 90s, but it's well worth revisiting if you happen to see a copy. Anthony Bourdain, Kitchen Confidential, another one I've read. I'm a big fan of Bourdain. I feel that he tells it like it is, and he is the first person to admit his mistakes. So this is a great read. And I was happy to find that at our Salvation Army, along with No Reservations, which is a show I quite like. I enjoy his interacting with the music, culture, and food of different locations. I really like his episodes about places like Finland. Well worth checking out. Okay. Saw this, Sweethearts of the 60s TV. That just looked kind of interesting, so I grabbed it. I'm not a Bob Dylan fan, but I saw this and I snagged it. I figured it looked interesting, and if it's not for me, I know enough Bob Dylan fans that this could be right up their alley. Physics of Superheroes. Excuse me. We'll get back to the fiction in a minute. But I saw this and I thought, oh, gotta grab that. All right. I've never read any of Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu, and yes, I am aware of the whole yellow peril thing that goes on with these, and I have that in mind. However, I believe that it's important to understand the culture that you're criticizing, so I figured I would check this out. Plus, it's kind of a cool paperback. Put that right up there. All right, copy of Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. I read this way back in the day, but I don't have a copy of this anymore, and I figured I'd grab that. Stephen King's Needful Things paperback. Don't need to say much about that. This looked interesting. This looks like crime fiction, which is totally my wheelhouse, so I grabbed that. And yes, I am kind of haphazardly throwing books every way. Another Stephen King. I have had the hardcover of this for a while that I've been meaning to read, but I saw this nice paperback. It's going to be easier to carry, more portable, so I hope to get to this sooner rather than later. And no, I've not checked out the television series, but I do want to. For all you Paperbacks from Hell fans, found a copy of the Amityville Horror. We know that the true horror in this story right now was Mr. J. Anson, according to his stepchildren. But I saw this and was like, yep, I'm going to grab that. All right. Read this in junior high school because they made me. And I've been resistant to things they made me read since then. But I figured I really should revisit this. It's a classic, and this is a nice copy. So that I picked up. Yes, Willie Nelson wrote a novel, and looks like it's kind of a Western crime novel, so I grabbed that. I was like, yes, that's for me. I will check that out. I'm a Willie Nelson fan. If you're not a country music fan, please check out Willie's work in the 70s. He's got a definite jazz and rock underpinning that is going to appeal to people who don't think they're country fans. So, Willie Nelson. All right. Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-5. I don't really feel the need to say a lot about that. This just looked kind of cool. Vampires of the Night World. Never heard of it, but hey, I like the cover. I think it was a dime, so I snagged that. Conan Doyle, Detective. I've not read a lot of Sherlock Holmes, or if any, but I figured this would be cool to pick up. Truman Capote and Cold Blood. Never read this. This is a true crime classic, but I've never read it, and so I grabbed that. A little more pop culturally here. Chuck Klosterman. I really did like Fargo Rock City, and I have read a few of his other things, but I didn't believe I had this one, so I grabbed that. Did not see the movie, but this is something that's kind of popular right now, so I figured I'd snag that. I think all the books at Salvation Army were like a quarter or a dime, so sold. All right. So you might have seen me showing the paperback volumes of Transgressions. I was not aware that there was a hardcover that collected all of those novellas. I've read and liked Ed McBain, Lawrence Block, Steve King, Donald Westlake, and Walter Mosley, and Sharon McCrum. There's a couple of McCrum books I really like. But I figured for 50 cents, I would grab that from our Recycle Reuse Center. So I'm a big music fan. You can see the CDs behind me. I have LPs. I actually do on this same channel. I also do vinyl stuff, and I show CDs and whatnot. And one of my great treasures is my early 90s copy of the Trouser Press 4th edition, which I picked up at our local Tower Records. I was happy to get. It had information on bands like the Jet Black Berries, Legal Weapon, the Gun Club, other bands that I will say changed my life in a lot of ways. So this was a nice replacement to my vastly worn 4th edition. So I found that for like $1. Okay, where do I start from here? Let's just kind of race through this. Paperbacks from Hell, John Coyne. This is the hardcover. Robert McCammon, Gone South. J.K. Rowling's. This is the third of the Corman Strike novels, so now I have hardback copies of all of them. Hopefully I'll have time to get to read them sooner rather than later. Joyce Carol Oates. She is a writer who I've heard a lot about but have yet to read, embarrassingly enough, so I picked up this. And because I am a big fan of the 90s movie that was based on this book, I picked up her Foxfire, which I hear the criticisms of the film out there, but I like it. So if you're a fan of the musician Jenny Lewis, or you want to see some early Angelina Jolie, or you want to see a 90s Gen X film dealing with sexual assault and rape culture, it's an interesting movie. I have not read the book, so I hope to do that. I found a copy of Bruce Campbell's If Chins Could Kill, which I already had, but wasn't going to leave that behind at the bag sale. So we're getting into stuff that I found at the bag sale here. Okay. Adam Hall's Quiller Memorandum. This has got a cool cover. These are things that you fill your bag with. I like the title of that one. I found this at our Kiwanis sale. Horror stuff, weird science fiction stuff, a couple of Dennis Wheatley horror novels, Peter Straub horror novel, Dan Simmons, Fires of Eden, and Song of Calais, Jonathan Latham, another copy of Chandler's The Big Sleep. I always grab The Big Sleep when I find it at bag sales because I will give it to people or sell it to them really cheaply. This is a book that people should be reading, so I snag it up every time I see it. Hey, look, there's a Harry Houdini mystery. This one came from the Kiwanis as well, the House of Cthulhu. All right, so getting into the real scores here and winding it down. Where are we time-wise? Yep, this is going to be a longer one. So I got this for 50 cents, which was probably too much because it's pretty hacked up. But it's John Ferris's Wildwood. This is a reader's copy. I am going to slap some packaging tape on this to hold it together. I want to read this. I'm not really all that interested in collecting it. But at a different store in town, I bought that at a store that I never ever go to, that I haven't been to in 20 years. I found John Ferris's The Captors. This looks pretty cool. So got a copy of Frederick Brown's His Name Was Death. I do also collect these Black Lizard editions. I like the earlier ones, but these ones are cool too. So I went to this bookstore in Chelsea, Michigan, little hole-in-the-wall place. They had a horror shelf in the back, and I found a bunch of stuff there, most of which I left behind. Prices were good, but I picked up John Ferris's Scare Tactics and what turns out to be a rare copy of Book of the Dead. Apparently there's a misspelling on the cover. I used to have both of these books, and I sold them off or gave them away years ago, so it's nice to have a replacement. All right, that's the big book haul. I wish I could say that's going to be it, but I've already made plans to go to another library sale this weekend, so we'll see how that goes. Until next time, any of these books jump out at you? Any questions, thoughts, comments, anything? Thank you to everyone that watches these. I know there's a handful of you. I'm grateful for that. This is basically me just rambling at this point. So catch you all next time.